All right, here's another issue I have a couple of. This is the October 1980 issue of Motocross Action Magazine. Still one of my favorite magazines ever, Motocross Action. Inside you have a really nice Motocross Foxes before they transitioned to just being Fox Racing. They were called Motocross Fox in the early days. Ad with Graham Noyce, Mark Barnett, Brad Lackey, looks like Rocket Rex Staten, and maybe Steve Wise looks like on there. Inside this issue, you have coverage of the DR 400 four-stroke that they've done some mods to make it more four-stroke ready. I'm sorry, more motocross ready. They have an article on improving Can-Ams at the time, which was a Canadian motorcycle. And there's also a great deal of race coverage, including the 500 GP at Carlsbad, won by Marty Motes, the Super Bowl of Motocross, a Grand Prix in Holland, and the Mammoth Mountain Motocross. And there's also an article on the ME 250, which was a Mugen upgrade kit for the Honda CR250. Really cool Pirelli ad here showing a Porsche 911 and then a couple of Yamaha, and I don't know what this other one is here. On the main jet was done by Dick Miller, who was the editor at the time. Let's see here, Jody Weissel, still with the magazine to this day on his Derby. I see a lot of these articles with him and Derbies. I don't know what the hell his deal was with Derby, but he was quite fond of them, I guess. This is on the dirt section, talking about like the news and what have you in the new motocross at the time. Interesting of note, this is a power valve, Yamaha power valve system on Mike Bell's OW works bike. This is something that actually never made it to production. They never did an air-cooled version with the power valve, but some of these early Yamaha works bikes had it. Answer ad is a really cool answer ad. At this point in their history, they were more of a hard parts company than a gear company. They transitioned later to be known more for gear, but early on they were known for their handlebars and these really trick alloy silencers, which were way better than the stock steel junk you found on the magazines. I mean, on the motorcycles at the time. Cool ad for Simons or Simmons. I'm not sure how you say that. Forks. Marty Motes used a pair of Simmons forks on his YZ465 to win the USGP there. Some Suzuki action reports, and then again, pick Tootsie here. So funny that they had so much more pictures of scantily clad women in this early magazine. It's more like what Transworld Motocross would have done years later. I think after Roland Hines came along, that all stopped. After Luft Racing, it's one of these Mark Charles stands. Apparently they were all the rage. I've never had one myself, but it's an interesting way to hold the bike if you're going to work on it. It's actually a good idea because you don't have the stand underneath to get in your way. It probably made it a lot easier to do certain things like sticking the motor in the frame and what have you. The dirt section here, Graham Noyce, who is Rolls Noyce, who is the 500 world champ. Quite a ladies' man, as I understand, and a partier, so I'm sure he enjoyed having his face in this lady's chest. This is the article on the DR 400 four-stroke. I had a DRZ 400 years later, and both the two-wheeled version and also the four-wheeler. I never ridden one of these old four-strokes. You know, you see tons of XRs. You don't see many of these, like Kawasaki four-strokes or Suzuki four-strokes from the late 70s, early 80s much. I don't think they sold a ton to begin with, and they certainly don't seem to be many still around. Now, this is my dream car in 1979, 1980. I was, you know, when Smokey the Bandit came out, I think I was about 8, and I thought, number one, that was the best movie of all time, and number two, that Trans Am was the coolest car of all time, so I would love to have it now. If you had this car now, it's probably worth like 30 grand in that condition. I'm sure it's worth quite a bit of money. Marty Motes here. Marty unfortunately passed away. He committed suicide maybe 10 years ago. Sad deal. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I think he had suffered with pain and some addiction issues, I believe, which is common for motocrossers. You know, I need to have my hip, both of them done, and you know, living in pain all the time is definitely hard on you, and years of racing will do that to you, and sometimes people go down a dark path. And from what I understand, Marty was a really awesome, upbeat guy, so it's real sad to see him pass. But he did get this one moment of glory, really the highlight of his career, breaking the European stranglehold on the USGP. Kind of signaled a change going forward too, because the US would win the Motocross des Nations a year later and kind of dominate motocross through the rest of the 80s. Carlsbad was always a cool event. This was the only event I ever saw as a kid. You know, Wide World of Sports. Motocross really wasn't on TV. I didn't have cable, and so yeah, I didn't have TNN or any of that stuff. So ABC, when they do it once a year, I get to watch it. It was pretty cool. This is the JT Racing ad with Danny Laporte. Let's see here, some more Marty Tripes. A very young Jeff Ward, Chuck's son, who would win the 1980 500 title for Honda. This is a I think that's maybe Steve Wise and maybe Chuck's son here, I think, at the Super Bowl of Motocross this year. These early Supercross tracks are very different than what we race today, of course. Much more like an outdoor motocross than anything you would consider Supercross now. Here's some 500 World Championship event here in, I think, Dutch, yeah. The Dutch Grand Prix. I got some Sand Masters here in the Dutch sand. Cool ad of Roger DeCoster. I always love these D grips. I used to run D grips and a D bruiser. They were my hot setup in the 80s and 90s. Love their stuff. That don't happen to them. I thought they were by far the best grips in crossbar pad at the time. Here's some stuff from Mammoth Mountain. Always get a lot of coverage of Mammoth Mountain. I've never been there. It looks like a really cool event. It's neat that it still goes on to this day. And they were still racing there in the lovely mountains 40 years ago. High Point boots, the iconic High Point boot that Jody infamously wore for many years. I don't know if you can still get it. There's another young lady in a bikini. The Mugen ME250 kit. I had a 1978 CR250, and this was these Mugen bikes were really cool. You get a kit to make it a not just upgrade the standard 250. You'd also get like a big bore kit of 360 in the days before Honda actually produced a open bike of their own. Here's a little article on improving the Can-Am, which was just goofy, terrible bikes in my opinion. Although the Rotex motors actually were pretty powerful in their day. They had some really good performance as far as that goes, but it seemed like the basic motorcycles always just looked so cobby to me. It wasn't really my cup of tea. These interesting little cartoony numbers they always ran in the 70s. Get yourself some Kayaba Air Shocks. It's funny, you hear about the Fox Air Shocks. You never ever hear about the Kayaba version, but it looks like KYB offered a version as well. I don't know if they weren't as good or if they just didn't catch on in the same way, but you just don't ever hear about those. Renthal, cool Renthal. This is a very early days for Renthal. They were sponsoring Marty, and if you look at his bike on the earlier page, you can see he's running some blue aluminum bars in a time when that was very trick. You gotta figure standard showroom bikes wouldn't get aluminum bars for another 30 years, which is kind of crazy. And then here you go. There's the end of the magazine with a nice little ad with Datsun on the back. So if you like this, check it out. It will be for sale on my eBay channel.